Hello, welcome. Apologies for the delay this evening. My tango class ran over. And so, with that in mind, we are running a little bit behind. Thank you for your patience. I never trust this thing. It's like flashing all kinds of warning messages at me about my internet. Regardless, here we are. So, let's read another story by Master Poe. And I'm trying to see if there's anyone that calls out to me more than another. And okay. What is the name of the one with, oh yeah, okay. The Masque of the Red Death. So we're going to check it off with our little pencil. And just do a little check right there. And for anyone who's upset about me writing in the book, it's mine. I can do what I want. Don't care. Wow, I just opened right up to it without even trying. That's very convenient, isn't it? Okay. Let me see what some of these warning things say. Close unused applications. Check your internet. Too low. Okay. Please stop. Okay, we're here. Let us begin. The Masque of the Red Death. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august taste. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers, and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were within. Without was the Red Death. It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade, but first let me tell you of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different. As might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre, the apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and lighted with orange, the fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The seventh apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavily folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum, amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro, or depended from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers, but in the corridors that followed the suite there stood opposite to each window a heavy tripod, bearing a brazier of fire that protected its rays through the tinted glass, and so glaringly illumined the room. And thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western or black chamber, the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenance of those who entered, that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang, and when the minute hand made the circuit of the face and the hour was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each lapse of an hour the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken to the sound. And thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company. And while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled as if at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embrace 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then were the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before. I just want to say, it really bothers me that the rooms are not in any kind of order, it seems. And I really enjoy how he added in this little note about how 60 minutes embraces 3,600 seconds of the time that flies. You know, it was just a strange little thing to include. Let us continue. It makes me happy. But, in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Duke were peculiar. He had a fine eye for colors and effects. He disregarded the decora of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. He had directed in great part the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers upon occasion of this great fête, and it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the masqueraders. Be sure they were grotesque. There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm, much of what has been since seen in Hernani. We have no idea what that is. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies, such as the madman fashions. There was much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. This sounds exactly like my vampire balls. Is exactly the kind of parties we're going to be throwing. To and fro in the 7 chambers were stocked, in fact, a multitude of dreams. And these, the dreams, writhed in and about, taking hue from the rooms, and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And anon there strikes the ebony clock which stands in the hall of the velvet, and then for a moment all is still, and all is silent save the voice of the clock. Their dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half-subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now again the music swells, and the dreams live, and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many-tinted windows through which stream the rays from the tripods. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the 7, there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls. And to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet, there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears, to indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. But these other apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life, and the revel went whirlingly on, until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock. And then the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more of thought crept with more of time into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled. And thus, too, it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the last chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz, or murmur, expressive of disapprobation and surprise. Then finally of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it may well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited, but the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod, and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. There are chords in the hearts of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion. Even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests, there are matters of which no jest can be made. The whole company, indeed, seemed now deeply to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger neither wit nor propriety existed. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to foot in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so clearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny must have had difficulty in detecting the cheat, and yet all this might have been endured, if not approved, by the mad revellers around. But the mummer had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was besprinkled with the scarlet horror. When the eyes of Prince Prospero fell upon this spectral image, which with a slow and solemn movement, as if more fully to sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers, he was seen to be convulsed, in the first moment with a strong shudder either of terror or distaste, but in the next his brow reddened with rage. "Who dares?" he demanded hoarsely of the courtiers who stood near him. "Who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise from the battlements." It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms loudly and clearly, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first, as he spoke, there was a slight rushing movement of this group in the direction of the intruder, who at the moment was also near at hand, and now, with deliberate and stately step, made closer approach to the speaker. But from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the murmur had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth hand to seize him, so that unimpeded he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the rooms to the walls, he made his way uninterruptedly, but with the same solemn and measured step which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green, through the green to the orange. I hate this. Through this again to the white, and even thence to the violet. There's not even a red or yellow. I hate this. Ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly through the 6 chambers, while none followed him on account of a deadly terror that had seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and had approached in rapid impetuosity to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleaming upon the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterward fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. Then, summoning the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revellers at once threw themselves into the black apartment, and seizing the mummer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock, gasped in unutterable horror at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like mask which they handled with so violent a rudeness, untenanted by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revellers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall, and the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last gay, and the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. That concludes our story of the Masque of the Red Death. That was fun. So, to carry on tradition, let's see, we have about 10 minutes left, so let us read some prose. And let's be honest here, not everything that was written is going to be the best thing that we've ever read. But you have to get through all of them to find the good ones. Yes? So we're just gonna keep on keeping on. Is it Moors or Mores? Regardless, this is the very first poem. I didn't read it because it looked a little long, but honestly, after reading Tamerlane, this poem is nothing. So this poem is called O Tempora, O Moors, or Mores. I'm not sure which one, so we're gonna go with, oh, I'm a vampire, I pronounce things the way I want to. We're gonna say Mores. Let us begin. Oh, tempora! Oh, mores! Oh, times! Oh, manners! It is my opinion that you are changing sadly your dominion. I mean, the reign of manners hath long ceased, for men have none at all, or bad at least. And as for times, although 'tis said by many, the good old times were far the worst of any, of which sound doctrine I believe each tittle, yet I think these worse with them a little. I've been a-thinking, isn't that the phrase? I like your Yankee words and your Yankee ways. I've been a-thinking whether it were best to take things seriously or all in jest, whether with grim Heraclitus of yore to weep as he did till his eyes were sore, or rather laugh with him, that queer philosopher Democritus of Thrace, who used to toss over the page of life and grin at the dog ears as though he'd say, "Why, who the devil cares?" This is a question which, O heaven, withdraw the luckless query from a member's claw. Instead of 2 sides, Job has nearly 8, each fit to furnish forth 4 hours' debate. What shall be done? I'll lay it on the table, and take the matter up when I'm more able. And in the meantime, to prevent all bother, I'll neither laugh with one, nor cry with t'other, nor deal in flattery or aspersions foul, but taking one by each hand, merely growl. Ah, growl, say you, my friend, and pray at what? Why, really, sir, I almost had forgot. But damn it, sir, I deem it a disgrace that things should stare at us boldly in the face, and daily strut the street with bows and scrapes. Who would be men by imitating apes? I beg your pardon, reader, for the oath the monkeys made me swear, though something loth. I am apt to be discursive in my style, but pray be patient yet a little while. Will change me, and as politicians do, I'll mend my manners, and my measures too. Of all the cities, and I've seen no few, for I have travelled, friend, as well as you, I don't remember one upon my soul, but take it generally upon the whole. As members say, they like their logic taken, because divided it may chance be shaken. So pat, agreeable, and vastly proper as this for a neat, frisky counter-hopper. Here he may revel to his heart's content, flounce like a fish in his own element, toss back his fine curls from their forehead fair, and hop over counters with a vester's air. Complete at night what he began a.m., and having cheated ladies, dance with them. For at a ball, what fair one can escape the pretty little hand that sold her tape, or who so cold, so callous to refuse the youth who cut the ribbon for her shoes? One of these fish, par excellence, the beau, God help me, it has been my lot to know, at least by sight, for I'm a timid man, and always keep from laughing if I can. But speak to him, he'll make you such grimace. Lord, to be grave exceeds the power of face. The hearts of all the ladies are with him, their bright eyes upon his Tom and Jerry brim, and dove-tailed coat obtained at cost, while then those eyes won't turn on anything like men. His very voice is musical delight. His form, once seen, becomes a part of sight. In short, his shirt collar, his look, his tone, is the beau ideal fancied for Adonis. Philosophers have often held dispute as to the seat of thought in man and brute, for that the power of thought attends the latter, my friend, the beau, hath made a settled matter. And despite of all dogmas, current in all ages, one settled fact is better than 10 sages, for he does think, though I am oft in doubt if I can tell exactly what about. Ah, yes, his little foot and ankle trim, 'tis there the seat of reason lies in him. A wise philosopher would shake his head, he then of course must shake his foot instead. At me, in vengeance, shall that foot be shaken. Another proof of thought, if I'm not mistaken, because to his cat's eyes I hold a glass, and let him see himself a proper ass. I think he'll take his likeness to himself, but if he won't, he shall, a stupid elf. And lest the guessing throw the fool in fits, I close the portrait with the name of Pitts. That was really fun because he obviously does not like this young man. That was a fun one. We have time. We still have 5 minutes. Did we read this one? Does it have a little check mark by it? Is this still Tamerlane? Oh, that's a long one. Let's see. Let's go. Dreams. Oh, that my young life were a lasting dream, my spirit not awakening till the beam of an eternity shall bring the morrow. Yes, though that long dream were of hopeless sorrow, 'twere better than the cold reality of waking life to him whose heart must be, and hath been still upon the lovely earth, a chaos of deep passion from his birth. But should it be that dream eternally continuing as dreams have been to me in my young boyhood, should it thus be given, 'twere folly to still hope for higher heaven. For I have revelled when the sun was bright in the summer sky, in dreams of living light and loveliness, have left my very heart in climes of my imagining, apart from mine own home, with beings that have been of mine own thought. What more could I have seen? 'Twas once and only once, and the wild hour from my remembrance shall not pass. Some power or spell had bound me. 'Twas the chilly wind came over me in the night, and left behind its image on my spirit, or the moon shone on my slumbers in her lofty noon too coldly, or the stars, however it was, that dream was at that night wind. Let it pass. I have been happy, though but in a dream. I have been happy, and I love the theme, dreams and their vivid coloring of life, as in that fleeting, shadowing, misty strife of semblance with reality which brings to the delirious eye more lovely things of paradise and love and all our own than young hope in his sunniest hour hath known. It was kind of lovely, wasn't it? Okay, let's do it. Let's read one more. Let's just do it. Spirits of the Dead. Now you know why I wanted to read this one. 1. Thy soul shall find itself alone, mid dark thoughts of the grey tombstone, not one of all the crowd to pry into thine hour of secrecy. 2. Be silent in that solitude which is not loneliness, for then the spirits of the dead who stood in life before thee are again in death around thee, and their will shall overshadow thee. Be still. 3. The night, though clear, shall frown, and the stars shall look not down from their high thrones in the heaven with light like hope to mortals given, but their red orbs without beam to thy weariness shall seem as a burning and a fever which would cling to thee forever. Now our thoughts thou shalt not banish, now our visions ne'er to vanish, from thy spirit shall they pass, no more like dewdrop from the grass. 5. The breeze, the breath of God, is still, and the mist upon the hill, shadowy, shadowy, yet unbroken, is a symbol and a token, how it hangs upon the trees, a mystery of mysteries. That concludes Spirits of the Dead. So this evening we read the Masque of the Red Death, O Tempora, O Mores, meow meow, Dreams, and Spirits of the Dead. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry for running late. I promise next week we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming of Tuesday 10 to 10:30. And until then, stay spooky. Goodbye.